The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost polite. It happened early in the morning before the restaurant opened, when the world still felt gentle. I was standing near the counter, holding a delivery receipt with oil-stained fingers. My eyes skimmed the page out of habit items, quantities, totals, and then paused. The restaurant name was printed boldly at the top. Below it were the names of my two cousins, not mine. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a receipt. A small thing. But small things have a way of tapping on you again and again, until you can't ignore them anymore. I had been running this place since I was barely old enough to reach the top shelf. I learned the kitchen before I learned patience. I memorized recipes the way other girls memorized songs. When my cousins went to school or traveled or took breaks to figure themselves out, I stayed. I opened the restaurant every morning. I closed it every night. Customers didn't ask for the menu. They asked for me. If she's not here, I'll come back later. They'd say. Suppliers called my phone, not the restaurant line. New staff watched me closely, copying the way I moved, the way I spoke calmly even when the kitchen was on fire. When something broke, I fixed it. When someone cried in the storage room, I listened. I never asked to be in charge. I just became necessary. My father used to watch me from a distance, pride and comfort mixed in his eyes. You understand sacrifice. He would say, that's rare. So I understood, or at least I thought I did. I worked without a salary because family doesn't count hours. I skipped holidays because someone has to be responsible. I told myself recognition wasn't important because love wasn't supposed to need proof. But proof is what the world runs on. Menus were printed. My cousins' names were there. Interviews were given. They spoke confidently about their vision. When awards were mentioned, they accepted congratulations while I stood behind the counter refilling water glasses. No one told me directly that my name didn't belong. They just never made space for it, and somehow that hurt more. There were moments, small, sharp moments when I felt invisible. When a customer praised a dish I had perfected for years, and my cousin smiled and said, "Thank you, we worked really hard on that." When a supplier negotiated with them, even though I was the one who knew every number by heart, I would go home exhausted, my feet aching, my hair smelling like smoke and spices. I'd sit on the edge of my bed and stare at my hands, wondering when helping had slowly turned into disappearing. Still, I stayed, because every time doubt crept in, guilt followed right behind it. "This is your family," a voice in my head would say. "Don't be difficult, don't be ungrateful." So I wasn't, until one evening, after a long shift, I wiped down the counter and looked up at the sign hanging above the door. Bright lights, bold letters, our restaurant, our pride, their names. I stood there longer than I meant to. I imagined, just for a moment, what it would feel like to see my own name there. Not bigger, not louder. Just present, just acknowledged. The thought didn't feel greedy. It felt human. That night, as I locked up, I realized something quietly unsettling. I had given them everything. My time, my energy, my loyalty, without ever asking what I was allowed to keep for myself. And for the first time in years, I wondered what would happen if I stopped trying to earn a place I already deserved. That question followed me home. It sat with me in the dark, and it refused to leave. I didn't plan the moment I spoke up. It slipped out of me the way truth sometimes does softly, after being held in for too long. It was a slow night. The kind that settles into your bones. The last customers had left, chairs were stacked upside down on tables, and the kitchen lights hummed with tired warmth. I was wiping the counter, moving automatically, when my cousins leaned against the register laughing about something trivial weekend plans, I think. They sounded light, untouched. I stood there watching them, and felt a strange distance open between us. Like I was seeing them from the other side of glass. "I've been thinking," I said, keeping my voice steady. Too steady, maybe. They turned toward me, surprised but relaxed. No one sensed danger. Why would they? "I think it might be time my name goes on the sign, too." The words hovered between us, fragile, honest. For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of my cousins laughed, not sharply, not cruelly, just easily, like I had told a harmless joke. "Why," he said, "your family." The other nodded, "Yeah. It's not like you need credit." I waited. Surely someone would understand what I meant. Surely my father would step in. He was standing near the kitchen door, counting receipts. He didn't look up. "Don't turn this into something emotional," he said calmly. "You help here, that's enough, enough." The word landed heavier than I expected. It carried years inside it. Every unpaid shift, every swallowed frustration, every time I had been told to wait my turn. I opened my mouth to explain, to soften it, to make it easier for them to hear. But suddenly I understood something with painful clarity. They weren't confused. They just didn't agree to them. I wasn't a partner. I was a constant, something reliable, something that didn't need acknowledgement because it wasn't going anywhere. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without breaking. My cousins had already moved on, joking again, the moment forgotten as quickly as it had been dismissed. My father finished counting and walked past me, his hand briefly brushing my shoulder, a gesture meant to calm, not comfort. "Don't make things complicated," he said quietly. I cleaned the rest of the kitchen in silence. The sound of the cloth against the counter felt louder than usual. Each movement felt deliberate, like I was memorizing the space. The chipped tiles, the familiar stains, the corners I had scrubbed thousands of times. When I hung my apron that night, I folded it carefully. That surprised me. I didn't rush. I didn't throw it aside. I treated it like something that had mattered. At home, sleep wouldn't come. Their laughter replayed in my head. Not mocking, not angry, just dismissive. And somehow that was worse. I realized I had mistaken comfort for care. They were comfortable with me because I made things easy. I absorbed the weight so they didn't have to. I smoothed problems before they reached the surface. I had been proud of that once. But ease, I was learning, is not the same as respect. The next morning, my phone buzzed early. A supplier asking about an order. Then a staff member asking about scheduling. Then a regular customer asking if I'd be in. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. For the first time, I didn't answer. That silence felt wrong at first, heavy, like I was doing something cruel. But as the minutes passed, it felt honest. I didn't go in that day or the next. No announcement, no explanation. Just absence. By the third day, my father called. His voice was controlled, almost amused. "Are you trying to make a point?" I looked around my small apartment, at the quiet I wasn't used to. At my hands, finally still. "No," I said, and I meant it. "I'm just listening to myself." He sighed, impatient. "You'll come back, you always do." After we hung up, I sat on the floor and let that sentence settle. "You always do." That was when I understood something fundamental. They believed my loyalty was permanent because I had never shown them otherwise. And in that understanding, something inside me shifted not into anger, but into clarity. I wasn't leaving to punish them. I was leaving to finally stop disappearing. The first week away from the restaurant felt unreal, like I was skipping school and waiting to be caught. I kept expecting my phone to ring with urgency, anger, apologies, confusion. Instead, there was mostly silence. At first, that silence hurt. It made me question myself in ways I hadn't expected. Had I exaggerated everything? Had I misunderstood their laughter, my father's words? Maybe I really was being emotional. Maybe this was what loyalty looked like, and I had simply grown tired of it. I spent long mornings sitting by the window, watching the street wake up. My hands twitched with habit, reaching for tasks that weren't there. I didn't know who I was without responsibility pressing against me. On the 8th day, a server from the restaurant messaged me. "They're struggling," she wrote. "Orders are late. No one knows the prep system like you. I read it twice." Then I put the phone down. That was when something strange happened. Instead of satisfaction, I felt grief. Not because they were struggling, but because it had taken my absence for my presence to become visible. More messages followed, suppliers asking why invoices were wrong, a regular customer saying the sauce tasted different, another saying the place felt off. I didn't reply to any of them. Silence, I was learning, is not emptiness. It is space, and space reveals things. With that space, memories began to rearrange themselves. I saw moments I had once brushed aside, how my cousins deferred decisions to me, but claimed outcomes as theirs, how my father praised my endurance but never my ambition, how often I had been told to wait, to be patient, to understand. Understand what? That my role was to hold everything together while others stood at the center. One afternoon, I walked past the restaurant for the first time since leaving. I stayed on the opposite side of the street unnoticed. Through the window, I saw confusion where confidence used to be. Movements were frantic, voices raised not in cruelty, but in disarray. I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Because for years, I had carried the unspoken belief that without me, everything would collapse, and that belief had kept me trapped. Seeing the struggle didn't inflate my ego. It softened something in me. I realized I was allowed to step away without rescuing them. A week later, my father called again. This time, his voice was tight. "You've made your point," he said. "Come back, we'll talk." There it was, not "I miss you," not "we need you," just a negotiation. "I don't want to talk," I said gently. "I want clarity." He paused. I could almost hear his discomfort. "You're being stubborn." Maybe, but for the first time, my stubbornness felt like self-respect. I hung up shaking, not from fear, from unfamiliar strength. In the quiet days that followed, an idea formed slowly, without urgency. I didn't rush it. I let it breathe. There was a small vacant space across the street from the restaurant. I had passed it hundreds of times without seeing it. Now it stood out to me, empty but full of possibility. I sat on its cold floor one afternoon, sunlight spilling through the window, and imagined my recipes there. My standards, my name, not bigger, not louder, just honest. I ran the numbers carefully, realistically. I used savings I had earned elsewhere, catering jobs, private orders I'd done quietly over the years, things I had once minimized because they didn't fit into the family narrative. The more I planned, the calmer I felt. No anger fueled me, no desire to prove anything, just a steady sense that I was finally moving in a direction that didn't require permission. When I signed the lease, my hand didn't shake. I didn't tell my family, not out of secrecy, but because this part was mine. As renovations began, people noticed. A supplier stopped me on the sidewalk. "Are you opening something?" "Yes," I said simply. He smiled. "Good. I'll be your first order." That night, I stood alone in the unfinished space, listening to the echo of my footsteps. For the first time in years, the silence didn't ask me to shrink. It asked me to grow, and I answered quietly, steadily, and without looking back. I opened my restaurant on a Tuesday. No ribbon, no speech, just a small sign with my name printed clearly, evenly, without decoration. I wanted the place to speak the way I had learned to calmly, through consistency rather than noise. The first customer walked in mid-morning. She paused, looked around, then smiled. "I was hoping it was you," she said. That was how it began. Word didn't spread like wildfire. It moved more slowly than that, person to person, recommendation to recommendation. People crossed the street because something felt familiar, because the food tasted the way they remembered, because the room felt settled. I treated my staff the way I had always wanted to be treated. I paid them on time. I thanked them, I asked their opinions and listened. When mistakes happened, we fixed them quietly and together. At night, when I locked up, the exhaustion felt different. It didn't hollow me out, it grounded me. I saw my family often, though not up close. My father began standing outside our old restaurant in the afternoons, watching the flow of people. Sometimes our eyes met through glass and distance. He never crossed the street. I didn't wave. I didn't hide. I simply continued. One evening he came in alone. The room went quiet in a way I hadn't prepared for. I greeted him the way I would any customer, calm, polite. He sat at a table near the window. He ordered my signature dish without looking at the menu. After he ate, he sat there for a long time. Then he said, "You could have told us." I nodded. You could have listened. There was no accusation in my voice. Just truth. He looked older than I remembered, smaller, not broken, just human. "I didn't realize how much you carried," he said. I believed him, and I also understood that realization had come too late to change the past. I carried it because I thought that's what love required. I said gently, "I know better now." He didn't argue. He paid the bill. He left a tip larger than necessary. That was our closure. Across the street, the old restaurant remained open, but something fundamental had shifted. They hired help. They adjusted. They learned slowly what I had been protecting them from, and I learned something too. I learned that boundaries don't destroy families, they reveal them. Some relationships softened with time. Others stayed distant. I stopped measuring what was fair and focused instead on what was peaceful. Late one night, after closing, I sat alone at a corner table. The lights were dim, the kitchen was clean, my name was on the wall behind the counter, not bold, not apologetic. Just true. I thought about the girl I used to be, gentle, trusting, afraid that asking for recognition would make her selfish. She wasn't weak, she was learning. I didn't win by taking something from them. I won by choosing myself without anger, without cruelty, and without needing permission. The justice wasn't loud, it was sustainable, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't known how to name before, peace.